don't mind if I bring it down a bit because it's not adapted for the guy from Charlottetown.
Ses orteils, là. Ses orteils, ça.
Ben, c'est pour ça que j'ai mis des espadrilles plus hauts. No. We should have done that in the sunshine. You know, it's much. Do you want to go first, or you want me to say something? You go.
Okay. Rogers announced this morning that it's going to be opening up wireless service on some parts of the TTC. Are you worried that they're jumping the gun ahead of your consultations?
Well, what I'm not happy about, and I'm the voice of millions of users of the subway system of Toronto, is that in 2023, that families, that kids, that users don't have access to network coverage. That is the issue. That's the frustration of millions of Canadians in our largest city that don't have access to network coverage. Just think about that. We're in 2023. You know, if we've been able to bring internet access to different regions of Canada, I'm sure that folks listening to us would think that you should have network coverage when it comes to the TTC in Toronto, just even as a matter of public safety. So I had already asked them to fix that. And then I gave them a 30 days delay to get together, Bell, TELUS, Rogers, to do that. And they failed to do so. So therefore I said, okay, then I'm going to be taking action. That's why we launched consultation, because that's part of the regulatory process that I have to follow. This process is ending on Monday, and you can be assured, and for all the users that are watching today, I can assure you that I'm going to take decisive action to make sure that we force the different networks to be able to offer coverage to the users.
Do you see Rogers' move today as a positive, or is this a hindrance to what action you will plan?
Listen, I fight for folks who are taking the subway. So for me, we want all Bellus, Rogers and Bell to be able to offer coverage in the subway system in Toronto, because it should not depend who's your provider in order to be able to access 911 or being able to call your mother if you're going to be late, or if there's any safety issue. I think at this point of time, I think Canadians are not looking and say, oh, this company or that company. They just want to know that in the largest city in Canada, in probably the largest subway transit, or one of the largest in North America, you just walk in like in many other places and you've got network coverage. How they do it, that's for them to fix. But my mission is to fight for Canadians who get that frustration every day and say, how can it be that I live in Toronto, I take the subway, we want to encourage public transit, but I don't get network coverage? So that's what I told them very clearly, and you can expect that I'll come with the proper response on behalf of all the users.
Force.
Sorry?
What do you mean force? You said you will force them. What does that mean?
Well, I'm the regulator, so...
Right, but how do you do it? Can you
Well,
lay
as
it
the
out?
regulator, I have a bit of tools in the toolbox to make sure that we serve Canadians, because
What's an example of the tool?
well, there's many things. You know, as the consultation is ongoing, I want to respect the process. You know, I'm a lawyer, so I want to make sure we have due process. So we got a lot of submission from the different companies. But as you know, under the Telecom Act in Canada, the minister has different tools. You've seen me, for example, when there was the Rogers outage, that I called the CEOs and I made sure that they understood where Canadians stand on that. I convened them just 1 day ago, I think, because of the forest fire. So my role is to speak on behalf of Canadians and express the frustration that I sense in Canadians, and my own frustration to the fact that after the 30 days deadline I gave them to agree on something, they have not. And therefore, we said, okay, we're going to take appropriate measures to make sure that as soon as possible, because there's some network infrastructure that needs to be built, but as soon as we can, that there will be coverage in the Toronto transit system. And I spoke also to the Mayor of Toronto. We're very aligned, and I can tell you that's something I hear also from all my caucus colleagues who are saying, listen, we need to act, and we're acting, and you'll see that we're going to make sure that there's coverage in the Toronto subway.
But there are people now on the TTC or shortly who will be able to use their cell phones if they have Rogers. Is that a positive step, or is that going to get in the way of what you were trying to do?
Well, let's say I want more. I want definitely more, because what I want is that it's not, I always take it from the user, not from the telco. My job is to fight for Canadians. So I'm saying if you're a Canadian, regardless that you have Rogers, TELUS, or Bell on your phone, you should have coverage in the subway system. So my mission is to make sure that people would have coverage regardless of the network they choose. That's their own choice. But my mission is really to make sure that we take measures, and we have already taken measures. The consultation process is ending, and when it ends, to the answer of the previous questions, I have a number of tools that will ensure that we won't have that problem anymore in Canada.
Monsieur
And
Champagne,
service
est-ce que
isn't
vous
enough.
reconnaissez que sur l'immigration, il y a un changement de discours de la part de votre gouvernement? On sent qu'on entend plus la portion de dire oui, l'immigration fait partie de la problématique du logement et oui, accueillir des gens, mais il faut bien les intégrer. Votre chef a dit ça ce matin. On n'entendait pas nécessairement ça avant. Est-ce qu'il y a un changement dans le discours?
Moi, je pense que non, dans le sens que moi, quand j'entends immigration, j'entends aussi pénurie de main-d'œuvre. Vous savez, je me suis efforcé depuis longtemps de s'assurer que le Québec, le Canada, on emboîte le pas de la nouvelle économie, l'économie verte du 21e siècle. On l'a fait, je dirais, de façon remarquable au Québec, où on a consolidé la position du Québec, par exemple, dans l'industrie des batteries. Évidemment, on va avoir besoin de gens pour assurer la prospérité à long terme. Je pense que les gens chez nous...
Votre chef le disait ce
Ben,
matin.
tout à fait, non, mais c'est... Moi, je pense que quand on fait le choix d'accueillir quelqu'un chez nous, on doit aussi s'assurer que cette personne-là puisse prospérer chez nous. Je pense qu'il y a comme un quiproquo là-dedans. Alors, c'est clair que, pour moi, l'immigration fait partie de la solution. Ce n'est pas la seule. On va avoir besoin de travailleurs, travailleuses. Vous avez vu avec les annonces qu'on a fait récemment, en région aussi, non seulement dans nos centres urbains, mais en région. Mais je pense que c'est un enjeu positif. Puis je pense que les gens chez nous comprennent que si on veut assurer la prospérité à long terme, on a besoin de gens qui vont venir. On a besoin de grossir l'écosystème. Et je pense que les gens voient ça de façon positive.
Minister, can I ask you about the politics of housing?
How your government set the table for housing to be the top priority, to be the thing that's seizing everybody? You have a 3-day retreat, and at the end of it, you have no timeline for a revamp policy. You have no answer for the Canadians who are going to food banks, who are in the middle class going to food banks because they can't make ends meet for housing. How is it acceptable, and how are Canadians supposed to feel anything other than just empty words if at the end of this retreat you can't even tell them when it will get better?
Well, I don't think Canadians feel that with respect. I mean, I've been going across the nation like my colleagues for all summer. Canadians have been clear about what they need, what they expect, and what's their concern. We've been talking for the last 2 days. We've been talking to experts, looking at different policy options. The Prime Minister was very clear this morning. And now it's all about action, action, action. And we've been already addressing some of these things. You remember, for example, when we talk about grocery, we looked at what we could do on the competition file. When we're talking about the cost of living, I mean, there's been different measures. I would say early learning and childcare has been one of the policies that I think will go down in history as one which has given more means to people at a time where you have high inflation and high prices. It allows family to have more disposable income. I think it's been great help for many families. I've heard that. But I would say, the Prime Minister was clear this morning. We still have time in the retreat. As you know, we're kind of at maybe 3/4 of it. But clearly, the direction and the priorities are clear. The priorities of the government are those of Canadians. People have said about housing. They talk about cost of living. And I think, as far as I'm concerned, people also want us to focus on the future, which is the green economy, to make sure that we position Canada not only for now and solving that, but understanding that in the future, Prime Minister talk about Volkswagen, talk about Bécancour. I mean, we're redesigning the economy of Canada for the 21st century, and these investments will pay dividends for generations to come.
Can I ask you about the politics of housing, though, sir? The politics of housing. Mr. Poilievre has been quite clear that he blames the government and the Prime Minister specifically for the housing crisis. What's your message to Poilievre on the government's action on housing?
Well, I would say, listen, he did not invent hot water. I would say, listen, we've been talking about housing in this country for quite some time. I mean, this is not new. But I would say you've had different time in history. We've gone through that. We learned from, we heard from experts, and there's a number of tools that can be put in place to ease that. But we understand the bottom line is that what we need to do is to listen to Canadians. That's what we've done. We heard their priorities. Everyone is aligned. The Prime Minister was clear this morning, and we're going to be acting. And
But
what's
there
the
are no
message to
action.
Polly?
The problem is that you're coming out of this retreat with no concrete next steps. You're saying, well, we'll talk about it. We've heard Canadians, they want action, but they're not seeing action.
well, listen, everyone in the country understand that it's not like a switch that you can flip and suddenly you're going to fix the housing issue. I mean, if that was simple, people would have done it. We heard from mayors, you hear from premiers, you hear from different constituents. For me, this is kind of a national issue that we need to address nationally. I think the Prime Minister was clear. You involve unions, you need to involve non-profit organization. We need to build more in this country to ease the pressure on housing, and the message is very clear, and the actions definitely will follow. But I think bottom line, we understand what Canadians concern, and we feel it. We feel that, you know, it's every month. People have seen their mortgages going up every month. But I think we've been on the ball way before Mr. Poilievre started to talk about that. So I would say, you know, people, like the Prime Minister say, it's very easy to say things like that. But what Canadians and those watching, they want is solution. We've been in solution mode. That's what Canadians expect.
What new solutions do you have?